Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCGO codes, including the stuff from Crown Zenith, make sure you check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using that code OmniPoke. For today's video, we are going to be looking at the Hong Kong Regional League Tournament. This was an over 400 player event, and we have the top 16 standings for players. And we're also going to look at the top 4 deck lists today. This is a post-rotation Scarlet and Violet tournament, so another great indication as we start looking towards that format. So in the top right in that graphic, you can see this was the day 1 breakdown of the decks in terms of how much play percentage they all got. So it looked like Giratina was by far and away the most popular and played deck at the tournament. Lost Box also having a really high showing, as well as Miraidon Regieleki, seemingly the standout archetype coming from Scarlet and Violet, where Miraidon is sort of the backbone engine with that tandem unit, seemed to be very popular. Decent amount of Mew, some Lugia still hanging on in there with some single strike stuff, as well as Giratina, Arceus as well, a nice combo, and it seems like the Guardi as well as Arceus other variants were taking a notable percentage, and yeah, not quite as popular as the other things, but yeah, Guardi seems to really struggle in a world with Giratina and Lost Box being this popular, which is a shame for that archetype, but it is what it is. Let's have a look at the standings. It was actually Mew VMAX that was able to win it all. Giratina got second. Lugia, two very different single strike Lugias actually made top 4, both respectively. Then we see more Giratina, more Mew. We do see a Lost Zone box in top 8, as well as a Rapid Strike Urshifu Inteleon VMAX, which I'm super interested in. I think that archetype is possibly going to be taking up massive, large chunks of the meta share. Because if you look at Lost Box, Giratina, and Miraidon Regieleki all being the 3 most popular archetypes, I believe that a Rapid Strike Urshifu with Inteleon VMAX can target all 3 of the most popular decks in format quite nicely, with that double gunner ability, having the option to Yoga Loop with Medicham to buy free turns to do more double gunners, because of course Scoop Up Net no longer exists, so you can allow a lot more of the damage to stick on the board, so you can really take a full advantage of this massively important Comp Fate engine for the Lost Zone decks, and also you hit for a really key type coverage with Urshifu into Miraidon players. So I think Urshi Intel is going to be that sort of up-and-coming archetype. We've already started to see it get some top 8 placements in smaller tournaments in Japan. I really expect that to make itself known in the metagame a lot more. I would imagine it to be at least around that sort of 5% mark alongside Lugia going forward. So just something to note there. I imagine that's a upticking trend. From there, it's just more Giratina, more Lost Zone box. There was an Arceus Rapid Strike Urshifu again, showing that Rapid Strike Urshifu definitely has a place in this metagame with its spread potential, with obviously with the Inteleon trying to capitalize on the comp phase is massive, but even just having fighting type coverage is pretty handy as well. So yeah, that's really the story of this top 16. Let's have a look at some lists then. This is the first place Mew list, and there really aren't too many new cards here. Of course, Nest Ball is the mandatory include, taking the place of Quick Ball, and Arven has actually found its way into the deck. It can grab a tool and an item card. So, obviously, giving yourself access to an extra Forest Seal Stone when you've gone second is pretty huge. So, that can get you, a turn 1 Arven is actually like an absolutely busted supporter, right? Because it can get you VIP plus Seal Stone, which is an incredible pop-off. But then also, mid-game, it can get you Belt Tablet if you need to go aggressive. It can get you part of a cross switcher as well, which can sort of declog the hand quite nicely. So I really like this. Even if it will just be a one-of, Arven seems to make a lot of sense in Mew builds, just for that turn 1 pop-off versatility, but also the sort of mid-game when I need to push for damage, or if I'm looking for a piece of my gusting, it can be massive. Plus it just gives you an additional out, because of course Lost Vacuum is an out to bounce path for yourself as well as for other hand disruptive situations. It's just a pretty decent card to see just for the versatility of items that you play. It seems like a very reasonable option, but overall it's a Path Judge DTE based Mew, very similar to what we come to know at the moment, just with those couple new inclusions, and Arven really has impressed me so far in Mew, so it definitely makes sense. In at second place, then we have the Giratina 60, and straight away I can see how it ended up losing to the Judge Path-based Mew, because this only plays one Beach Court, that new stadium that reduces the retreat cost of your basic Pokemon by 1 colorless. I would expect this to be usually a 2 count in Giratina, in part so that you can actually use your Drapion against Mew, of course. There are ways that you can still use Drapion, you just have to double gate to it, but that's really intense and difficult to do, especially without your abilities. So I'd be surprised if we didn't see 2 Beach Court being more standard in Giratinas, but it's also surprising to see that this chose to play a Path of the Peak. I think Path Roxanne is still definitely a Power Spike combo that you can try and piece together, so I'm not going to say that Path is like necessarily bad in Giratina. I just think an extra Beach Court definitely gives you more license to use your Drapion, use your Lumineon, and just keep your Greninja online throughout the entire game. So a little bit of a surprise to see such a low count of these Beach Courts. Outside of that, some other pretty interesting inclusions. Thornton coming in as well as Clara. These are like your Pokemon recycle options, which is pretty interesting. Obviously, Clara having upside of getting you a variety of energy to hand, so you can continue to draw with Greninja and get turn attachments with your stuff. I think because especially we're seeing things like one Sableye, the fact that you can Thornton back into it sounds very powerful. Equally, Claring it back could be very cool. And surprisingly, actually using Horlucha, getting your flying entry value, and then Thorntoning it into something else, then means you could simply Clara it back on a future turn as well. So there could be some minor combo synergy between these two supporters. But what I really like is, of course, it gives you just much more control over your board. You don't need to have these vulnerable Vs sitting around on the board. You can simply do your Gate and Thornton and evolve into a V-Star if it's been a basic that's been in play for a turn. So very versatile card. It's been in old Giratinas back in the Lost Origin meta, so I wouldn't be too surprised if we saw this in a handful of lists going forward. So yeah, again, not too different. Again, incorporating a couple Nest Ball, but literally only a couple. And other than that, a pretty straightforward list. Onto the 2 Lugias then. It seems like the best energy to tutor from the deck is now Single Strike energy, because it allows you to post a couple great type coverages in Fighting and Dark, but also because the damage modification of Single Strike energy actually makes, in this case, Tyranitar a very high damage output threat. With the Single Strike Crush doing 240 base, you just need 2 Single Strike energies to be knocking out V-Star Pokemon like Giratina. So you have type coverage, but you also have V-Star beat stick potential with your T-Tar, which is very, very solid. And this list is actually making some really interesting choices. It's playing Quad Double Turbo, and it's also playing Radiant Jirachi. So it gives you a way to, bring in this Jirachi as a 1-prize option. You are trying to high roll it sometimes, but, if it can come off, like with Quad Double Turbo, you can pay retreat your Lugias to get into that Jirachi in the first place and just let it sit in the active to give yourself an Entrusted Wishes play where from that point on, you could get, double Archeops, Ultra Ball, or some sort of combination that fixes your way towards a Summoning Star, I suppose is the whole idea here. So definitely an interesting one, and it can be, I suppose, your Wall Breaker. And let's not forget that for things like Parasol and Wash Water, they do rotate, so there's nothing stopping the Astral Misfortune attack. So it can be a way to cheese some prizes, which is actually pretty spicy. Now, the one thing I will say about this list is there's a lot going on, and it's only playing 3/3 Lugia, 3 Archeops, and it's not even maximizing its counts of, like, capturing Aroma. So I'm personally a little bit sus of this, because I feel like, from what I've played so far of Lugia, I want to maximize these counts. Like, I'm at the point of where I'm thinking I'm playing 4 Lugia V-Star, as well as 4 V and 4 Archeops, just because you need to get that online as quickly as possible, and you can't rely on the flips of capturing aromas or trying to hit stuff from Great Balls and such. So I'm thinking of just having really high counts of that. So it really does surprise me to see such low counts, if that makes sense. And also the choice to play like second copy of Professor Burnett when it feels like it's already like quite a niche card that you only play if things haven't gone your way. Stuff like that makes me a little sus of the list. And even Trekking Shoes, which is like sure adding a bit of discard synergy, but not actually like that strong in reality. So I think we can definitely play around with this, but the core is here. The core of Stonjourner hitting a key weakness into the Miraidon Regieleki players and being a decent 1-prize attacking Mon, and also this Tyranitar being the star of the show against Mew and also opposing V-Star decks, so it seems very reasonable overall. But then there's a completely different list here that's also incorporating that single strike package, but it's much more evolution based. This was actually how I initially envisioned Lugia, going, but I've actually tested more of the Tyranitar, surprisingly. But one of my early theory crafts was having an Urshifu line and an Umbreon line. Again, you have those two key weaknesses at your disposal, but the Urshifu VMAX gives you an even higher damage cap with that Gmax 1 blow, and the Umbreon gives you gusting, which I think is really important for this deck because it is actually very good at targeting like 2-prize Pokemon and 3-prize Pokemon. So just having that option of having a turn 2 bring something up and hit it sounds really important to me. Definitely against things like Giratina, actually, where you never want to be hitting into Comphase and whatnot because they have up trade potential. You really want to be pressurizing their bench. So I think that's actually pretty important. I do really like Dark Signal. It's obviously like a very powerful ability. It's been a while since we've seen it around, but the fact that you can V-Guard your Umbreon sounds very good against Mew as well. It can be a real problem for them. Obviously, you're not damaging the Umbreon either because you're not using Houndoom, you're using Primal Turbo. So, actually a really annoying, tanky Mon for them to deal with. Definitely a different lineup of supporters, much more streamlined, much more simplistic. I've hated judges whenever I've playtested this deck, but it is, I suppose, when you don't play many 1-prize Mons, your only way to like slow down Lost Box players. So it's trying to just be a disruptive card, I suppose, and add in some chaos to the mix. This actually has a ton of stadium bounces. The last one that we saw only played 3 tower. This is at the full 4 copies and plays a Lost Vacuum, so it was really respecting of Path of the Peak to just make sure their strategy comes online and works. But this one is a little bit light on Ball Search as well. It is up to the 4 Ultra 4 Capturing Aroma, which I think is basically staple in my eyes, but it's not playing any Nest Balls and it's not playing any Great Balls. I feel like I like to work in a couple of those to fill out my spaces because this deck wants to get a couple Archeops in the bin, Lugia's into play, but now you have the added issue of you're adding more evolutions to your deck, so you even want things like Umbreon V established in the opening stages, so you can threaten turn 2 Gust and have, you know, a place to Primal Turbo, which is pretty important. This is actually really high on the earn count as well. I feel like you don't rinse and repeat Gmax 1 blow all that often, so I could see this earn count going down to like 2 copies, especially because you also play Impact Energies to be those like midway point rainbow style effects, but just a few things here and there. I could also see just the support account increasing, like even just having more Serenas or like Zinnia's Resolves in the deck is low-key like actually pretty helpful just to have extra discard synergy and more supporters to like fill out the curve. Even just second Luminion could be pretty interesting. So I think both of these Lugias leave something to be desired. I do think, of course, this is still early metagame, so things are going to be refined that little bit more when we get into, you know, playing a lot of games online, as well as in-person events. Of course, there's the EUIC that people are testing for, so I'm sure there's a lot of people ironing out deck lists as we speak, but it feels like these are definitely good starting points and conversation pieces of how lists should be looking, but I do really think there will be changes as we go forward. But that's not to write off the result. You know, this was a 400-player tournament. It was best of one, so all of these decks have to walk that tightrope of consistency and still have enough greed in the deck to get through every matchup and also, you know, win those 50-50 style matchups, etc. So, yeah, that's my real thoughts on the list so far. I'm definitely most happy with the Mew 60. That looked really, really good. It didn't surprise me that it won at all. The Giratina 60 had a couple of quirky things going on. And the Lugias, I feel like they're a little bit further away from where I found my testing to go. But it's cool to see both directions working, and Lugia still finding a way to certainly be a relevant deck in the game. The only thing we didn't really get a list for, which is a little regrettable, is the Rapid Strike Urshifu Intel deck, which I think is a real up-and-comer. And by the time we probably get towards EUIC, I think it'll be established as probably a top 10 deck in the game, as one of the only decks that targets both Miraidon as well as the Lost Zone engines. So that's my thoughts. Let me know what you think down below, and I'll see you in another video tomorrow. Cheers.